Hello, everyone, and welcome to the course of world history. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson, and today we are looking at Russia. We're going to be covering a large span of Russian history here that will get us up to the point where Russia really becomes a world power. That is with Peter the Great, this fine-looking gentleman right down here. So, our essential question is, how did Russia become a major world power? Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Early Russia, before Russia was even a word, we've got to trace them all the way back to Slavic tribes. And this is the major ethnicity that goes into the Russian people. The Slavic people settled the city of Kiev, which is in modern Ukraine, around the 800 CE. And this is where they turned from a tribal people into more of a civilization. And from Kiev, they start to push their influence outward as they create a state, which is known as Kievan Rus. This is the first Russian civilization. Now, Kievan Rus was a nature which was a blend of Slavic and Scandinavian people, with definitely the heavier side of that being Slavic, but definitely taking in some Scandinavian influence as well from the Vikings who had penetrated down into this region. They had a culture which had converted to Orthodox Christianity during the Kievan Rus time. Remember, Orthodox Christianity is centered in Constantinople, and it's what exists after the schism of Christianity. Now, by the 1000s, Kievan Rus was a large and wealthy European state. Keep in mind, Europe was still very fractured during this time, comparatively poor to other civilizations in the world. And yet, compared to European states, Kievan Rus was doing pretty well. But they did weaken over time as they faced continuous attacks from nomadic Turkic people coming out of Asia. They were in this sort of weakened state when they were finally done in once and for all by the rapid, powerful, massive expansion of the Mongol Empire in the mid-1200s. So the people of Kievan Rus, the Russians, fell under Mongol rule. And that initial Mongol expansion was devastating to the Russian people. About 50% of the Russian population died during the Mongol expansion. As we've studied the Mongols, we know resistance can be dealt with pretty brutally by the Mongols. Now, their territory, right around here, became a key territory of the Golden Horde. So as the Mongol dynasty broke into its four composite pieces, the Golden Horde ruled that area that had been Kievan Rus. But in Mongol fashion, they kind of allowed some semi-autonomy. A lot of the rulers and government remained in the hands of local people. So the Russians still had some power within this greater Mongol empire. And Kiev, being completely destroyed at that time, was not where the center of Russian power arose. Instead, it was in this other city which grew from insignificance to power during the Mongol age, and that was Moscow. Moscow really grew in power, influence, size, and started to have influence over surrounding territories as well, and became kind of this dominant, semi-autonomous territory within the Golden Horde's land. Now, Moscow was still technically under the Golden Horde's sway, but as the Golden Horde gets shattered and starts to fracture in power, Moscow sees an opportunity here. The Golden Horde isn't as powerful as it was. They can't respond to an organized, powerful revolt the way they used to. And so Moscow seizes the moment. And they declare their independence in modern terms. They kick all the Mongols out of their territory and throw off the remnants, the idea that they are subservient, that they have overlords in the Mongols. No, the Russians are now, by the 1450s, fully independent and acting as an independent nation. Now, the Russian independence, 1450s being clearly out of the shadow of the Golden Horde, coincides with the fall of Constantinople. So Constantinople collapses, Byzantine power is now non-existent, and the Grand Duke of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, Ivan III, this fellow right here, sees an opportunity in the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. He takes in the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, and they marry. So he is now married into the non-existent Byzantine Empire. Now, why would you do this? Well, the only reason you would do this is to then claim a legitimate succession of the Byzantines being the Eastern Roman Empire. So Rome will continue in Russia. Russia is the third Rome since Ivan III declared it to be so. Now, Ivan III was followed about a century later by Grand Duke Ivan IV, who didn't like this Grand Duke title. If we're the third Rome, then I need something a little bit more imperial. So he changed his title to that title of a Roman emperor, to Tsar, which is simply their translation of Caesar, the Roman imperial title. So the Tsarist period begins in Russia with Ivan IV, also nicknamed Ivan the Terrible. Now, Ivan the Terrible is not named Ivan the Terrible because he was a horrible ruler. In a lot of ways, he was a very effective ruler. He really does expand Russian lands a lot. He defeats 3 of the Khanates, which had arisen from the collapse of the Golden Horde. Russia doubles in size under the leadership of Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible. No, he gets this name because boy, oh boy, did he have a temper. And this temper kind of turned around to bite him as some things that he did impacted his own successors, and that he killed his son. He got so angry one day that he beat his son to death. In another incident, he beat his daughter-in-law to the point where she had a miscarriage, and he lost his grandson as well. So Ivan the Terrible was named the Terrible for this fierce temper that he had, a temper that actually did damage to his own empire. After Ivan IV, under Ivan IV, he does seek to expand further westward into Europe, wants to push into Europe and become more of a European power, but the Russians are not able to push very far at the time. Poland, Lithuania, and Sweden align with each other to push back Russian attempts to do so. And indeed, after Ivan's death, Poland and Lithuania will unite, and they become one united country for a time. And united, they're able to push back and actually conquer into Russian territory that had been, part of this Grand Duchy. Now, you can see here kind of the modern countries laid out. But prior to Poland and Lithuania pushing back, a lot of this territory and in Ukraine had been under Russian control. And Poland with Lithuania is able to push into Russia, actually almost all the way to Moscow itself. So Russia was really struggling on their western frontier, but on their east, they're doing quite well. Russia has defeated most of the remaining Khanates. There are a couple down here that are still around, but he defeated most of the Khanates, captured all of northern Asia, and actually has pushed themselves all the way over to the Pacific Ocean during this time period. Not Ivan's life, but started during Ivan's life and continued for a while afterward. Now, Peter the Great is kind of the capstone of this lesson. This is where Russia becomes a great world power. Peter turns Russia's attention back toward Europe after, kind of getting beaten up by Poland and Lithuania for some time. He's able to take some advantage of some divisions within Poland and Lithuania, and is able to win back much of the territory that had been lost, and more. Peter's conquests actually allowed Russia to reach the Baltic Sea for the very first time and establish a port, a European port city that could then access Northern European capitals and tie Russia more in with European culture and European trade. This new capital city, named after Peter himself, because, why not, is St. Petersburg. Now, these conquests actually took Russia all the way to Berlin, and Russia briefly held Berlin as a captive city, but one of Peter's successors was a very pro-German, pro-Prussian leader, and gifted that city, or gave that city back, not exactly a gift, but gave that city back to the Prussians, and helped the Prussians to reestablish their power. Eventually, Prussia will come to be the modern state of Germany. So, European Russia. Peter the Great has turned this mostly Asian empire into a Eurocentric empire. It has been primarily been seen as a European power ever since. Under Peter, the Russian government actively sought to adopt more European culture and government practices, particularly modeling themselves off of the French, who they saw as kind of like the ideal of European society. And from 1721, late in Peter the Great's reign, until the present, Russia has always been considered a major player in European politics and European foreign affairs. Nothing happens in Europe from this point forward that doesn't at least consider Russia in its calculations. All right, that is it for today. It was quite a lesson taking Russia from the Slavs to Peter the Great. We'll definitely talk about Russia again. They're very important to world history after this point, but that's all for today. I hope you learned a thing or two, and farewell.